Today we're going to talk decimals. We're going to review how to add and subtract decimals and how to multiply decimals. So for starters, I want you to make a page like this in your notebook. Use the whole page and label or divide it into 4 boxes and label each one: adding, subtract, or addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. If you need to, pause the video really quick to give all students a chance to make this in their notebook. Now, I want you to take about a minute or so and talk about words that mean the different things. So what words mean addition, what words mean subtraction, and what words mean multiplication or division. So pause the video and give them about a minute to discuss the different words. As you're discussing, you may want to jot some of them down as well. Now in your notebook, you've had a chance to talk about the words and what they mean. So in your notebook, I want you to jot down some of the words in case you missed any. If there's any extras you can think of, I want you to jot those down as well. So here are the words. If you can, just pause the video right here and give everyone a chance to copy this down. Now, as I'm recording it, I see a typo right here. So please make sure it is each, not each. So make sure you spell that correctly. All right, pause the video right now and let everyone have a chance to copy all of this down. Okay, you should have all had a chance to copy these. So let's go ahead and continue. Now, when we talk word problems, we need to figure out what it's asking for. So usually the easiest thing to identify first is what is the total? Is it asking for a total or did it give me a total within the problem? If it's asking for a total, that's what I'm solving for. I know my problem is either going to be an addition problem or a multiplication problem. If I'm given the total and I'm solving for one of the pieces, I know it's going to be subtraction or division. And at that point, you can use those keywords you just copied down to decide which one it is. Now, at this point, I want you to copy this box, the part plus part equals total, all 4 of those down in your notebook. If you want to use T for part instead of the whole word and T for total, go for it. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to have this copied down. You can do this on the new page or on the same one you just copied on if you have space. All right, so let's look at a couple practice problems. One thing to remember when adding or subtracting decimals, decimal points must be lined up. You have to line up decimal places, you have to line up place value. So if we look at this example problem really quick, says Sandy purchased 2 patio chairs that cost $57.65 each and a table that cost $146.22. What is the total? For total. So that tells me these other pieces, now I see that's a word, so I'm gonna go ahead and make it a number, but I see that these are parts. So my chairs are a part and my table is a part. So I know in this case we're going to add because it wants the cost of everything. So we're going to use the equation part plus part equals total. Now it said she purchased 2 patio chairs. So we're going to have to either multiply 57.65 by 2 or just add it twice. So 57.65 plus 57.65 plus 146.22, and that's going to give me my missing total. Now, one thing I would suggest doing before you add all of that up exact, I see multiple choice. So immediately my brain goes to rounding. Let's estimate. Let's see if I can knock off any choices that just don't make sense. So 57, I would say this is about 58. I would even go one easier and say it's about $60. Therefore, this one is also about $60. And this one here, 146, I would say that's about 150. So now I would add those two. I know 60 plus 60 is 120 plus 150. And if I add those two, 120 plus 150, if I add them up, I get about 270. Now, if I look at my choices, A is too low, B is too high, C is way too low, D is my answer. So make sure that you are using some of those strategies. Now, had I solved it exactly, you would have had to make sure to line everything up, line up those decimal points. But again, it's multiple choice. I highly suggest rounding first and going from there. Let's look at one more example. It says Hannah drew straight lines in her driveway with chalk. The table shows the length of the lines. What is the difference? So that immediately should mean subtract in meters between the length of line S and the length of line P. So it's looking for the difference. So difference means subtract. So we're going to take line S and subtract line P. Now remember, we have to line up our numbers or our decimals. And if you would like, you can add a 0 as a placeholder. Now again, I would suggest estimating to see if this will help us narrow it down. I would say 7.75 is close to 8, and 1.8 is close to 2. If I subtract, I get 6. Well, this is close to 6, so is that one. But knowing how to estimate, I can eliminate for sure A and C. Now, if I go solve the actual problem exactly, 5 minus 0 is 5. 7 minus 8, I can't do it, so I have to borrow and regroup. 17 minus 8 is 9, and 6 minus 1 is 5, therefore B is my answer. Again, your go-to all the time should immediately be estimation, since it is multiple choice. Now, again, that should be a review from last year, so let's move on to multiplication. Again, this is also a review from last year. Now, we can talk, if you look at the bottom left corner, part plus part equals total, and break it down that way. But also there's another method called TEG. In TEG, the T stands for total, E talks about how much is in each group, and G stands for the number of groups. Now you see symbols beside things. So if I am looking to solve for the total, I am going to multiply. Just like what we said down here, if I'm looking for the total, I multiply, because TEG is only for multiply and divide. And if I am given the total and I need either the each or the groups, well, that's my part. So that means I'm going to have to divide. And you see right here, there's a dot here and a dot here. And this line right here creates a division sign, meaning if I'm looking for this or I'm looking for this, I'm going to end up taking my total and I'm going to divide it by whichever one of these I'm looking for. If you think about it like a fraction, this total is my numerator over whichever one I'm given to solve for my missing. So let's practice. Oh, and one more thing. This sentence right here, each and every one is perfect. That is there to help us identify which part is each. Sometimes in word problems, it'll say how much is each one. Sometimes it might say how much is every one. And sometimes it'll ask for how much is it per one of something. So let's look at a problem. First of all, it says, let's estimate this problem. It says Scott drank 3.5 bottles of water yesterday, and each bottle contained, oh, I see that word each, contain 1.2 pints of water, so I know that's my each. How many pints did Scott drink? So it's asking for the total. So therefore, each bottle, so that was my each, so this one has to be my number of groups. So I'm looking for my total. Each is 1.2, and I drank 3.5. However, remember, this problem says to estimate. So 1.2, I would say, is about 1. 3.5 is about 4, and I'm looking for my total. So since I'm looking for the total, the X says I need to multiply. So I'm going to take 1 times 4, and it'll give me 4. So how many pints did Scott drink? He drank about, that's what the squiggly line means, about 4 pints. So let's do the same problem, except let's solve it exactly. So again, this one was my groups, each. So this one was my each. And this question was my total. And if you like the part total, this would be my part, this is my part, and this is my total. So remember, part times part equals total. Or if I use TEG, well, I'm looking for my total, so I multiply. So 1.2, 3.5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 1 is 5, plus the 1 is 6. I'm done with the 5, so I drop a 0. 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 1 is 3, and if I add it up, I have 0, that gives me 12, 4. And recall from last year, you count the number of numbers behind the 0. So there's 1, 2. So starting at the back, you go 1, 2. So the final answer should be 4.20 or 4 2/10 pints. Now, when I estimated, we said it would be about 4. So therefore, you can see that we were pretty close with the estimation. So just remember, when we multiply decimals, you need to count how many digits are behind the decimal in your problem and make sure you have that same amount in your answer. So let's talk this really quick. Expressions, one says to place the decimal point. So right here, I've got 1, 2 numbers behind the decimal. So I go 1, 2, decimal goes there. So let's look at the next one. In my problem, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So in my answer, I need 1, 2, 3, 4. So therefore, there goes my point or my decimal. Next problem, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And lastly, there's only 1 because in 9, there's a decimal hiding right there since it's a whole number. So I only need 1 in my answer. Now, really quick, something to be aware of. If I pretend for a moment that it was this, I would then have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers behind my decimal. So I would have to move 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in that case, I would have to put zeros as placeholders. Just something to be aware of in case you run across that. So really quick, let's look at this last problem together. It says Mrs. Nixon went to the, so let's try it again. Mrs. Nixon went to the store to buy candy for her students. Candy was on sale for 90 cents per pound. If Mrs. Nixon purchased 2.5 pounds of candy, how much did she pay? So if I look at this, it's saying how much did she pay? So it's asking for what is the total? What's the total amount of money? It says per, remember each and every one is perfect, therefore this is my each. And this one has to be my number of groups. Now, this is not a multiple choice problem, so you need to work it out exactly. Now, 2.5 can be written as 2.5. Something to keep in mind, when you multiply, you do not have to line up the decimal points. Multiply as if those decimals were not there. So at this point, you would multiply this like normal. So take 5 times 0, 5 times 9 is 45, carry. Scratch out my 5 and put a 0. So now 2 times 0 is 0. 2, oops, I completely messed that up. Let's try that again. So 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 9 is 45. Carry my 4, but I have no other number, so let's write it. And then now cross off your 5 and drop a 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 9 is 18. And if I add it up, 0 and 0, 5 and 0, 4 and 8 is 12, carry, and I get a 2. And then count your numbers, 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3. So Mrs. Nixon spent $2.25, because I can drop that 0, on candy.